All right, well, it's a little after 6. We're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to appreciate everyone who has tuned in virtually. I know it's the roads aren't great out there, and everyone who made it in today. I'm Kelsey Bean. I'm the district's chief of staff, public information officer. I just want to say that this is the first town hall that we've hosted since I've been here. So I'm sure we'll learn a lot, and the tech is always a challenge, so bear with us. I want to give a huge thank you to Crystal Logan, who has agreed to be our moderator for this event. Crystal is the Vice President of Community Programming at the Aspen Institute, which is a global nonprofit educational organization. She's also a fourth-generation resident of Basalt who understands the many issues facing the community. Tonight, she's going to be serving in a neutral role to facilitate a conversation between the Roaring Fork Schools Board of Education and the school community. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelsey. So just a reminder, we've got index cards, I think, in the audience. So if you all have questions, feel free to write your questions on those index cards. And I have this microphone on. Oh, yeah. So hopefully you all can hear me. I can hear myself really well. So I think it's working. I want to welcome everyone and thank you all for joining us. And I'll introduce, I'm really honored to be here moderating this important town hall. And I'd like to introduce our distinguished Board of Education directors, Maureen Stepp, Jasmine Ramirez, Catherine Kuhlenberg, Natalie Torres, and Penny Teitler. Catherine is the board president. Jasmine is the board vice president. Natalie is the board secretary and treasurer. And I think on behalf of the community, we thank you all so much for serving in these really important roles. Super important that you all have given your time to these positions. I applaud the district for hosting this town hall. This is a great opportunity for the board to share information with the community about their process and deliberation on this really difficult topic of housing. And it's a chance for the community, parents, teachers, district staff, and the public to ask questions. So the intention is not to solve anything tonight or to come to any conclusions tonight. Rather, this is a chance for the board to answer questions and for the community to gain some insight into the board's process in dealing with a challenging situation. So the agenda for this evening is as follows. The board will show some slides first, and then we will move into the Q&A portion, and then we'll talk about next steps. So before we begin, I'd like to outline a few guidelines that will follow this evening. We have a lot to cover and we only have 1 hour. So we ask that everyone speak and act in a respectful manner. It is possible to respect each other's point of view without agreeing. So in other words, you can disagree without being disagreeable. Please keep an open mind. Please listen to each other. Please assume positive intent. Please be solution oriented. Please stay on topic. We are here speaking about the housing situation and not any other topics. And then, so we ask that you all uphold these norms, both here in the room and on Zoom. And also please silence your cell phones if you would. And with that, I welcome anyone to jump in with any concerns about the norms. Otherwise, we'll just assume that we're all agreeing to these guidelines. So let's see. And also just a reminder, members of our greater public, our community, who wish to share their views with the board can do so in writing at any time. So that's also a great way to have your voices be heard. So I think with that, we'll move into the slides.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you, Kelsey, for getting everything prepared for us this evening. I think as a board, we're all excited to be hosting, as Kelsey said, one of the first town halls. So this is intended to be a more informal process. We have a brief presentation that we want to share, hoping to answer some of the questions that we anticipate we will be getting. And there's also an FAQ page that was printed out and shared at the table if you don't have that. Each board member is going to go through some slides, and then we're hoping to get into the question and answer. So I get to start with the obvious, the problem that we all know exists. We live in the second most expensive district in Colorado, and that problem has been exacerbated year over year, especially in the last couple. Between 2020 and 2021, housing prices increased by 47% in Basalt and Carbondale, and in Glenwood Springs by 24%. This is causing a crisis across all levels, and the board recognizes that this is impacting every single person within our district. Let me switch to the next one. And one of the focuses for the board is recruitment and retention of staff at all levels. In regards to the current superintendent's salary, it's 5% higher than the average for Colorado superintendents who are in districts between 3,000 and 9,000 students. In contrast, the cost of living in Roaring Fork is over 40% higher, and the housing costs are estimated to be around 150% higher than the rest of Colorado. One of the things that we compared to that you can see in the FAQs is our 10 sister districts. These districts cover a wide range from very, very small to very, very large. And those are considerations that also need to be taken into account when you're talking about superintendent compensation. In that table, in the FAQs, it also includes the median cost of housing in each of those districts. And so it's important to note the salary in comparison to the cost of housing. And these are some of the things that the board was considering. But at the end of the day, we all recognize that housing is a huge issue, top to bottom. And the fact that the highest earner in our district also cannot afford housing only enunciates the issue for every single person, and identifies for us as a board the importance of acting on this across the district.
So the strategic priority of the board and of boards previous to ours has been to invest in talent, to develop, retain, and attract great teachers, leaders, and so on. We have worked towards being able to pay top third of comparison districts, and we've made a commitment to invest in staff housing. It is our goal in the Roaring Fork School District to recruit and retain great staff at all levels. And this should apply to all staff, as many of us have shared and made a great effort. And I think in this area, obviously commend the community for letting us know and being aligned with us in this. We've made it our goal to pay staff in the top third of comparison districts. And we believe that this should, we believe that this should apply to all staff in every department within our district boundary. I also want to point out that this was an issue for all of us in the last superintendent search process that came up and was flagged by HYA, who was our consultant. 20 out of the 22 candidates asked about housing. And so we were made aware at that time that this was going to be an issue that we would have to eventually come to, but we did not feel that during the superintendent search process was an adequate amount of time for us to make a decision on this.
All right, so transitioning into during the superintendent search process. So the research done so far. So one of the questions that we got from quite a few folks is, where did this come from? How has this been worked on? What got us to this point? So you'll see in this slide, spring 2022 really was the beginning of the discussion after having a superintendent search, which really highlighted that most of our districts have something that is offered to superintendent candidates. That is something that obviously we want to stay competitive with other school districts to attract these candidates. Early in the summer of 2022, our board members met with local bankers and district staff to discuss a model that could be considered. There was some research done in the late summer to explore options from a donor-funded model, other options to provide assistance and monetary implications of each of those different models. In the fall of 2022, that work was continued towards a donor-funded model. Research was also done with local nonprofits and experts in giving locally and nationally, as well as exploring and considering other sample contracts and models. So here we are now in the winter 2022, 2023, where after looking at different options and exploring what was out there, we shifted gears and really looked at a proposal of a model throughout the district that is more in alignment of a down payment kind of assistance model, not at all the option that's the final resolution, but rather, okay, well, maybe this could work for us. And it's in alignment with a proposal we had really looked at for the district that aligns with the housing program for all teachers, staff, and leadership.
Okay, I'm next. So as you can see, we did do a lot of research and looked at a lot of other school districts and what they're doing. So some districts actually buy a house for their superintendent, that each superintendent comes in and just lives in that same house. Aspen does that. There's a couple others. Some districts offer a housing stipend on top of a salary. And then that gets into para complications. We do have property in the valley that we looked at. What would it take to build a house? So there's a lot of different models out there. And the reason that we are leaning towards the down payment assistant is, you can go to the next slide already. So we feel that it's the most fiscally responsible. It is a loan program. And it's basically a one-time equity investment in helping not only our superintendent, but all teachers and stuff. So the rental program that we have right now is great, and we're building 50 more units, but it's not enough. But it is a rental program, right? So the down payment assistance program helps people on a path towards home ownership. So we wanted to make that distinction. Right now, we are not decided on an amount, and we are not decided on like the repayment options. There's different repayment options out there as well. So there's options to do like 1% a year, or wait until the end, and when the house is sold, then the district gets the money back. So there are options put in place that protects the district from not losing that money. So this is the way we're leaning. That is why this is something that Denver Public Schools uses. And we spoke with, there's a third party that helps manage that program, which seems to be working for them. And I think we just heard recently that Aspen Public Schools is looking at this program too for some of their other administration and staff. So it's, that's the option that is on the table that we're looking at.
Hello, again, thank you all for coming here. The next slide, we just wanted to present this slide to make sure that we are clarifying a little bit a term that has been used, that the superintendent is our sole employee. And the idea behind this isn't us saying we're only looking at the superintendent and we're only looking at them and then there's everybody else. What it means by being the sole employee is that the superintendent shouldn't be in a position where the superintendent has to advocate for themselves, because that would be a conflict of interest. And there is nobody else who is in the position to advocate for the superintendent. So that is the board's role, to make sure that they're advocating for the superintendent and not having other people in that position, or especially the superintendent in that position, who is then has that conflict of interest. So we do look at all employees in the district, and we're trying to make sure that we are looking at what we think is best for the entire staff. And as this relates to housing, the reason it was brought up the way it was is that we had asked for this to be done for the superintendent, since it is the board's position to do advocate for the superintendent, but at the same time, we task the superintendent to look at how this can be done for everybody else or other people at the same time. And the last slide that we have for the presentation is, what are the next steps for the board? Today, our job is to listen to community feedback, and that is something that have been hearing strong and hard on this situation with housing. And so we know one of our jobs as a board is to listen to our constituents. And so we are hearing you, and we're trying to listen and hear what is being said and make steps towards what is being said that we needed to do. Some of the things that we have heard is that we are moving too fast through processes. So that is something that we are trying to take a step back, slow down. What we're trying to do right now with this process is stop and slow down a little bit and see what needs to be done. We've also heard that we need to bring the public, bring the administration, bring the teachers along with us as we're going through a process. So it's not just heard at the staff meeting and it's not disseminated in that way. So that is something that we are working towards. It's not to say that's not going to happen at times. As a board, we're tasked with making lots of decisions in a rapid manner when we have 12 different things on the agenda. And so not at all times are we going to be able to think ahead in ways that we need to, but we are hearing that as a need and an issue, and that we are working to try to make that happen also. Also, we've heard that we needed to, it would have been good if we did a better job collaborating with stakeholders, and especially in this case, the housing committee. And so we're hoping that we can, as a board, engage with the housing committee, talk to them, see if we can work together to come up with some solutions, and also engage with other constituents and stakeholders. And so in order to do that, we're going to be in the next period of time putting out some kind of form where people could sign up and be part of a committee that we could meet to talk with. And so please look forward to a way to sign up if that is something that interests you. And then we know that this is on the next board meeting agenda on April 12th. The idea there is to either further discuss, or if we were able to get together with people and come to some kind of accord, to take a vote. But right now it's more of a time to further discuss and be able to make sure that we can update where we are in the situation.
Great, thank you. So I think we did get a lot of questions in advance, and we look forward to getting all of your questions as you have them. But I think it's a good idea to kind of level set here by posing a few of these questions that are on the frequently asked question form that you all have. We could just start with a couple of those. The first one is, how did you come up with 500,000 as the down payment assistance number? Who would like to answer that?
Anybody?
Well,
I can. So there's a couple of different scenarios out there. One, again, comparing to other districts. Another one is looking at the median house, the cost of housing across the state. And so with our housing being, what was it, 140% higher than like in Front Range, that 500,000 kind of brings that more in alignment with buying a house on the Front Range. Another argument is that we're investing more than $500,000 in each of the teacher housing. So it's comparative there. Again, it was less than buying a house of like 1.2 million or which is the average price in our district. So there's lots of different ways to look at that. Again, we haven't decided on that as a number, but those are the ways that number came about. Add anything?
I'd just say that in the initial proposal, those were some of the considerations. I think the main goal is to make this more as competitive as possible in a hot market of superintendents. Some of the research that we came upon, and I'm sure you guys feel this, is post-COVID, it's called the Great Resignation of superintendents. 1 in 4 superintendents retired in the year after COVID. And so we're recognizing that we need to be able to attract quality leaders, and we don't want to be in a position where we're turning over leaders year over year because housing is an issue. As it became clear that more districts are providing this benefit when they're faced with turnover, it became pretty clear that we had to. The last time that we were in the position of hiring a superintendent from outside of the valley, we offered a salary that was 2.8 times, or sorry, the housing price, median home price was 2.8 times the salary. Now it's over 7 times the salary that we're offering. And again, we all recognize housing it's just become unsustainable in the valley. It's out of reach of so many people. And so, as Maureen said, like part of the reason that we landed there on an amount up to, and considering the person that's coming in, it's so that housing prices here become more competitive. We're not bringing in someone who has to downgrade significantly because they're unwilling to do that in coming here. That's what we heard, right? And so their dollars get them something similar, still not similar, because we're still pretty far off even with assistance. But they're not giving up what they have where they're coming from.
Thank you. A similar or a follow-on question that came in the last couple of days was, how can the Board of Education justify this proposal when the superintendent's salary has already been adjusted for housing?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say that, we are paying the superintendent comparative to what at the time, and the numbers are on here, and I'm sorry that all but 2 of our comparison school districts have a much lower cost of housing. And these are the 2022 median cost of single family home within the town that the district office is situated. One of the things we heard during the superintendent search process directly from our community that was incredibly important to everyone, to the majority of our stakeholders, was that the superintendent lived in district boundaries. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were competitive in pay, and that we also made it clear to the future leader of our district that we wanted them to be able to live in our district boundaries. And so we wanted to make sure to provide the community numbers of school districts in comparison to ours, and also recognize that this is even in 2022, these numbers have changed drastically from when we did our superintendent search. And so we've seen an increase even on comparative districts on how much they're paying their superintendent and the cost of living in those areas.
Great, thank you. Can you share your research about how other districts have provided executive level housing assistance to their employees? You kind of touched on this already, but.
I can take that one since I shared the slide of what research has been done so far. So a lot of it has been outreach to other school boards. Obviously, we don't just work in silos. We work with other school districts. We do our best to try and support one another as well, because these are other individuals who are in similar positions and experiencing the same things that we are. And so we often, as board president, as board members, will reach out and say, can you help me understand what you're going through? How is it that you were able to come up with housing, whether it's, a housing stipend that's offered in a neighboring district for their position, or a house that they've been able to provide for their leadership in their district. What are some things that you considered? So that was really a lot of the research was outreach to school districts, as well as to national organizations like school board partners that could really help us look at a national level. Obviously, we would prefer to compare ourselves to other rural, more comparable districts.
Good.
Anything?
Thanks. Who has preferential choice, or in other words, who has first choice for the down payment assistance? I'm assuming that means who on the staff gets that.
We don't have a down payment assistance program yet, so those details are not worked out. There's a couple of different options that we can use. One of them is the housing committee that they kind of have the rules about the rental program right now. They would not be in charge of the superintendent loan though, because they work for him. So it's just kind of a conflict of interest. The company that DPS uses is called Landed, and that third party manages the program. So that's an option. So we're looking at different options. Another option is to have a bank do it. So again, we don't have a program, so we don't have answers to that question.
Okay. We have a lot of. oh,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Just to further clarify, and Kenny touched on this a little bit. The board is not empowered to create a program for the district. The board is only empowered to determine compensation for the superintendent, and this would be a benefit as related to that. So the first step that we took in this process was directing the superintendent and his staff to figure out a plan and how this could be applied to other members of our community. That is not within our control. That is beyond the management that we have. We only have managerial duty and powers over the superintendent. And so when we say that we're trying to do this for the position of superintendent, our hope is that there's a process that mirrors that for the rest of the staff within the district, but we aren't empowered to figure out the nuts and bolts of that process. We're relying on staff who are employed full-time to do this. We're a volunteer board members who, again, are charged with only the hiring, firing, and supervision of one employee within the district. And so it's a great question, right? And that's the complexity of this problem and how you apply it down. I think what I feel, and I think what my fellow board members feel, is urgency and coming up with a solution. Like, we're losing teachers, we're losing bus drivers, we're losing people left and right, hand over fist, because of housing. And so the urgency is there. But unfortunately, we aren't empowered, nor do I feel like it would be appropriate for us to come up with a program for the entire district. Like, we don't have the knowledge and expertise to do that. That's something that district staff is charged with doing.
And when we charge the superintendent and looking into that, I think it's important that we're able to look beyond what is happening now with how housing is allocated, and understanding that there are many positions in the district that don't qualify for that housing, and what can we do for lots of positions who also are at risk of not being able to buy housing, and as we're trying to fill positions, what do we do for principals? What are we doing for directors? What are we doing for teachers who are trying to own houses too? And so that is something that we want to be looked at and discussed, and say, what are steps forward that we could perhaps participate in?
Great. Okay, we have a lot of questions. I'm just going to keep reading them off here. Can the loan be paid back interest-free while the recipient is still employed with the school district?
Yes, that would be able to be paid back, but we also want to clarify that it's not necessarily a loan. It is an investment. And by having down payment assistance, it isn't loaning out, where then when you're loaning money, it would have to be through para, and there would have to be additional compensation that way. So yes, it would be able to be paid back during the time. And along with that, we want to make sure that any kind of appreciation that would happen along that time would be proportional to the district. So if there was X number of dollars given to an employee in a down payment assistance program, and if the house doubled in price when it was sold, then the district would get 2 times of X back in appreciation.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the initial proposal that was brought forward is for the broad model of providing a housing benefit in this way. Again, because we felt that this was the most fiscally responsible way to do this. If we were looking at purchasing a home, it would be a much larger upfront outlay of dollars. There would be ongoing costs associated with maintenance. And then there would also be the consideration of reporting that benefit as compensation to the state and matching taxes, para, retirement. And the benefit becomes much larger to that employee in that scenario, and the cost much larger to the district. And this type of model, and if I'm going too far in the weeds, tell me. And this type of model, it's an equity investment. And so the district is investing in the equity in the home, with the hope being that at the end, the home has accrued value and those same dollars can be used to support the same position again. So it's a one-time investment of funds in a position that will then serve multiple people in that role for years to come. The specifics of like payback provisions, those are things that we want feedback on, that we want to figure out what the community is most comfortable on. Those are things that would be negotiated with the potential recipient when you get into that phase. But the high level model is an equity investment, and the hope is on the end, your dollars have grown so that when the housing market has again changed and prices have increased in 5 years and 7 years, those same funds, those same dollars that we're able to use now to support one person can be used to support the next person in proportionately the same way.
And I know we have a lot of questions, so I do want to add just one other thing, and we would do the best that we can in looking at these options to protect that investment as well. Because we obviously do not know what the future brings. We don't know what the housing market will be, but we would do everything in our power to protect the district's investment and make sure that there's some safeguards in there when we discuss the details of that repayment structure.
And some of that is further outlined in the FAQs too.
Yeah, I think as far as the FAQs go, can you go through where is the money coming from for the down payment?
I know some questions have come up. It's like, that's a lot of money, and why can't it be put toward teacher salaries? And if you know anything about fund accounting, there's recurring funds, which are teacher salaries and benefits, and they're recurring because we have to fund those every single year. And then there's one-time funds, which would go to like capital funding, buildings, school buses, that type of thing. And we have reserve funding, again, which can be used for one-time things. So this money would be coming from our reserve funding. And again, it's an equity investment. So we not only plan on getting back the initial investment, but the increased value of that investment. But it's not money that can be put into the teacher salaries. And if anybody wants to watch the 6-hour IBB meeting talking about all of that funding models, that's where you learn about recurring funds and one-time funds. And so right now that's where we're working very closely with our CFO to see how much is available for this program, not only for the superintendent, but for the rest of the staff and faculty.
So that exact comment that you just made leads to this question. So maybe you can reword what you just said or add more detail. If we have 500,000 in reserves for one person, how much of our reserves can then be earmarked for down payment assistance for teachers?
Again, we don't know. We don't have a final answer for that yet. But in working with the superintendent and his staff and the CFO, and our COO, Jeff Gatlin, we're looking at right now $3 million. So again, how much is going to each person and how many people that can support, we don't know yet, but those are the numbers that we're talking about right now.
Great. Was Newcastle included in the home price evaluation? So in other words, lower home prices. Was that considered in the decision-making process?
Was Newcastle purchasing a home in Newcastle?
Yeah.
No. Okay, I want to stress how incredibly loud it was for our district community that our future leader lived within district boundaries. That was loud and clear, super important. We made a point to stress that during our interviews with all of our candidates to say, will you commit to send your kids to school in our district? And will you make a point to make sure that you are in community with our community, which is this district, whenever you get a chance? And we made a concerted effort to make it clear that our district community wanted the future leader of our district to live within our district boundaries and to be of the community. So the answer is no.
Okay, let's see. We all know our teachers and staff are also struggling to live here. How is the board supporting housing for all staff?
I think the way we're supporting the staff is starting in June, we're hoping to break ground on building 50 new units, for which we are spending in the neighborhood of $26 million to have those 50 new units. That is definitely one way that we are looking at continuing to help staff with housing here.
Well, and just to add to that too, I think we mentioned earlier a few times that this program is also in alignment with what would be available for teachers and staff. Our job, as Catherine mentioned, is to really look at how this would work for a superintendent position, in addition to what housing options would be available for a homeownership, in addition to the rental opportunities that our district will provide.
I think one thing that came up at our last board meeting too, a lot of people are coming with some really creative solutions, which we appreciate. And so there was, talk of, can we do any like kind of housing stipend or something for teachers and staff? And, the answer is we don't know. We need to research these, and again, we are directing the superintendent and his team to research these options. As you know, education funding in the state of Colorado ranks 49th out of 50th in the country. And so our funding is only so much. And what we do with that, we try to put as much of our budget, it's close to 89% of our budget goes into salaries and benefits for people. So what we can do, we will try to do, and we keep exploring. Again, there's only so much money to go around. So we'll try to make the best of what we can do with it.
And I would just add that I think individually, we are also making concerted efforts to be in communication with legislators at the state level, to call on rent control, to call on issues that are affecting rural Colorado, that are affecting the teachers in our district. We're making a concerted effort to be loud about the fact that our situation here at home is so different to the rest of the state. And so, I think individually as board members, we're also trying to make sure that we are advocating for teachers wherever possible, advocating for bus drivers, advocating for staff at all levels, because we hear it, right? Our staff comes back to us and lets us know that we have 13 positions that are unfilled in the bus drivers, and we have kids who aren't able to use the same mode of transportation as everybody else, and we're having to find ways to accommodate all of that. And we know it's unfair, right? We are hearing that our families are being pushed out and are now living in Rifle and driving and commuting here to drop off their children at Glenwood Springs High School, and then their parents are having to commute at home. We know it's impacting everybody across the district, and we are highly aware that this is a situation that is plaguing our entire district community at all levels.
So let's see, this one is, why can't we expand staff housing to include leaders instead of down payment assistance for one employee?
So there has been some talk about expanding the current rental program to include more people. Those are the rules that the housing committee came up with when that program started. So again, the board doesn't have any influence over that process. But that has come up several times now. It's like, well, why can't we just include everybody else in the rental program? And we're going to include teachers in the down payment assistance program. So we're kind of opening up both options, the rental program and down payment assistance, to everybody.
And I think another one, when we're looking at the fiscally responsible, by doing this type of program, it is not costing any more for another employee than it would be to be putting them into the staff housing. The amount paid per housing unit is similar. And so it's not like it is financially different in the amount of money towards those programs.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I guess just to follow up on Director Tyler's comments, I think the explanation on that amount is, again, we are responsible to advocate for the superintendent, and we have made a concerted effort to try to alleviate this issue with with the employee that we oversee, but we are, this is a proposal. We're actively trying to listen. We're actively trying to come to a place of how do we ensure that we have great leaders across the entire district? And so this is still a conversation that I think all of us are trying to advocate. And, I do want to also say that as board members, we all want what's best for the district. All of us, work tirelessly to make sure that we're advocating not just for the students and for the teachers and for the lunch lady and for the custodian. I mean, all of our district matters so deeply to us. And so we really just want to come up with solutions to make sure that this problem is solved.
And when it comes to offering housing to teachers and staff, do you know how it's prioritized? How people get into the limited housing that is being built or that we have at this point?
Currently, it's a lottery system, and there are different factors that are weighted, I think, including assets, including income, all of those things. And one of the questions that we received is if there would be something similar like that for the superintendent. And from my perspective, the answer is, of course, like the proposal said, it's up to a specified amount. And so if we have someone coming in who has huge personal assets and is able to purchase in our district the way that previous superintendents were able to in a different housing market, then no, we're not going to offer up dollars in assistance. If in the process of hiring, it's clear through negotiations that that's outside of the reach of the preferred candidate, then as a board, I think that that's a tool that we would like to have in our tool belt for recruiting and retaining high quality leaders in our district. Again, for me, this became so clear during the process last year, and we had meetings at that time to discuss it. And like we've said over and over, 20 of 22 candidates said this is something that is necessary. Our consultants said, you guys have to figure this out. This is necessary. We're doing this in searches all across the country. Our candidates, we're not going to be able to get candidates to apply for a role in Roaring Fork without housing. And so at that point in time, we were like, okay, this is an issue, right? We've got to figure out some solution to this. But if the preferred candidate has assets, like, no, then it's not necessary to support them in that way. So I don't know if that went.
Okay, you're probably familiar with the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. This is an organization that is signed on to by Basalt, Carbondale, Glenwood. And their top goal is setting up a buy down program. This person encourages the board to join and engage the commission. If the district invested in a buy down program, then these homes would become deed restricted, which helps provide a greater inventory of affordable housing. Can you speak to how you've thought about that, or if you're in touch with that coalition?
I had a meeting last week with somebody who is a member of that coalition. And I know today up in Aspen, there was a housing summit, and I made sure that our superintendent and our chief operating officer and our chief financial officer met with one of the members of the coalition. I set them up to have a meeting today. And so they are in discussions about what they can do as joining this coalition and how we can work to help each other move forward in trying to figure out what is best for our valley in housing and work with this coalition.
I just want to add to that. Every organization or institution in this region is dealing with the same issues, right? Every county commissioner, every chamber, every city, the healthcare systems, the college, are struggling with the same types of issues. And the coalition is trying to band together to try to figure these out. But no one's come up really with a solution. think the hospital and the college are starting to buy properties to be able to rent to their employees and staff and faculty. So it's valley-wide, and there's all different types of solutions, but no one's come up with that magic wand to figure it out.
Following up on the use of reserves, does the district have 3 million to invest in real estate? And if so, what portion of the reserves is that? Sorry if I butchered that question. Okay.
What portion of the reserve is 3 million, is there 3 million available to invest in activities that we do that?
So currently under our policy, which we just updated this fall to get in alignment with best practice, as recommended by, why am I blanking on the name of the finance? Not Casby. The one that Nathan and I are going to this month. Egenomics, yeah. Yeah. Egenomics, which their whole focus is on school finance. Sorry, I'm blanking on the term. The best practice is to maintain 10% of your overall operating budget and reserves. We're in excess of that right now. So we're already allocating a significant portion to the Meadowwood project, and the remaining monies that have been identified. And I'm not certain that it's 3 million. I think that's a question that has to be asked of our CFO to identify the exact amount of additional excess. It would be in excess of that additional 10% and 3% as required by Tabor.
There are some questions about how it works if the superintendent were to leave, and can you speak to how the superintendent would profit on the property if he were to leave?
So the way it would work is if a house costs $1 million, and just to make it easy, and again, I'm going to use 500,000, and I don't want to get caught up in that number, but as an easy way to understand, if a house was $1 million and there was $500,000 of down payment assistance given, and say 5 years later, the house sold for $2 million, then the district would get the percent that they invested into the property, and then the homeowner would get the percent that they invested. So in this case, the superintendent or the homeowner would walk away with $1 million, and the district would come back with $1 million. And that house would need to be sold upon termination of the contract in a set amount of time that would be determined ahead of time with the company that we were looking into this type of program with. They have it set up that sometime between 6 or 12 months that it would need to be sold upon termination of contract.
So now all those specifics are again things that would be negotiated out. The board has considered what their position would be. And so some of the things to consider would be the district would want to have the option of a right of first refusal to be able to purchase the house from the employee. So if there was a downturn in the market and the overall price of the house was lower and it makes more sense financially to buy the house, then we would have that option first. In a lot of these scenarios, it also the investment begins to accrue interest at a relatively high rate immediately upon separation with a D-Day. Like it has to be sold in X amount of time, a reasonable amount of time to put a house on the market and sell it. And if it's not done, then the district is empowered to take it over and force that sale. And so there are lots of different provisions that we could consider as a district in entering into an agreement like this. Ultimately, again, for us, it came back to this idea of being stewards of public dollars. These dollars aren't going away. They can be reused for the same position over and over again. It doesn't require maintenance costs that like real estate or real property would require. We're not paying property taxes on it. All of these things that we would have to consider if we were going the route of buying a house or providing even a housing stipend, because that's considered additional compensation. But these nitty-gritty details are all things that we're soliciting feedback on. We have ideas and we've seen what other districts have done. We've reviewed other contracts that have been in place. And the ultimate goal for the board, right, is to protect the investment of the district. And so we've considered a lot of variables, but those aren't set in stone. Those aren't worked out. This proposal is related to the broad idea of an equity investment in a property versus another option to support housing.
This question is how, let's see, has the board taken into a consideration that Superintendent Rodriguez has stated that he would like to respectfully decline the $500,000 offer? Is this something you all will take into account when finalizing the decision?
Yeah, I would say again, we're trying to come up with a district plan and district program that is in alignment with something that would be available to district wide for teachers and staff and school leadership. So if anybody doesn't want to participate or chooses to decline, they have every right to do that. Or we could set parameters that, you know, that allow different types of participation, whatever those details might be. Nobody is required to participate. It would be an option because again, we're doing this to attract quality candidates within our district and stay competitive with other districts. So I would say that anything that you do, you have an option to either participate or not, and perhaps at various times in which you decide that that's the most appropriate to participate in a program.
Thank you. There were several questions that came in about this process and how it has damaged a little bit of the culture and the climate as a district and potentially tarnished the superintendent's reputation in the process. Can any of you speak to how you're rebuilding or how you're looking to rebuild trust within this process and how you're thinking of taking all of this feedback into your upcoming discussions?
I understand that. I think, well, this town hall is obviously a approach that this board is taking. We hope to have many more in the near future. I'd also like to point that this board decided a month before this came before an agenda, before a board agenda where we were gonna try to make a decision for us to really put it out into the district to gather feedback. And so I think this board has heard during our campaigns that the need for transparency was an issue, that there was a lot of communications issues at hand. And so this board has, in this process that, you know, some of us, like surviving the pandemic was quite a feat. You know, I think we have staggeringly created opportunities for us to say, like, we need to do better next time with communication. We need to reflect on how that went. We need to do a different approach this time. We've pushed not only our communications team, but ourselves as board members, like, who can you talk to? How can we get this message across well? This board also welcomes the community's input and emails and contact. Like, we have never shied away from picking up the phone and having a conversation. We would prefer that instead of there being rumors being pushed out into the district, that we would be asked. But I also think that falls on us as well to make sure that we're dispelling rumors as we see them happening. So we are conscious that this is something that we need to do better as we move forward. And I think this board is really making a concerted effort to make sure that we are not only providing more opportunities for community engagement, but that we're being transparent in the process.
And I would like to also add, I think it is important, and I've learned that is important, that is we're engaging in process that we try to bring in a broader perspective prior to decisions being made so that people are informed. There's more rationale about why on the decision. And we've heard from more constituents and more committees who might have been working on types of issues. And I think it's important that we do more front loading as a board. I think it's more important that we do more front loading as an executive, I don't want to say an executive team, more front loading in all issues that we're bringing up at board meetings that involve the district and the direction of the district, and that we make sure that we are gathering information through important and key members of the community of the district from teachers, so that when decisions are made, it isn't a surprise, but this is a direction that we were building towards, and that we have that buy-in in order to move forward with decisions.
Can I just add to, and I know that there's a lot more questions to be asked, but I want to say in response to building back trust is keeping in mind that we all learn from every experience that we've all had. I've never been a board member prior to this experience. And then 3 months in, the COVID hit. We're learning. We want to also ask that you help us do better. You don't come into a role like this saying, I have it all figured out. I know exactly how to approach a down payment assistance program for a super. That's not at all what happens, but rather you experience things, and sometimes it goes really well, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, I hope you learn from it. I think that we could grow and that we can do better through each one of those experiences. So I ask that you help us with that, and we do the best to respond as best as we can.
Thank you. Thank you all for your responses. Thank you all for your questions. We have way more questions that we didn't get to, but I'm hoping that I'll give you all of these questions, and I'm hoping that you'll put them into your frequently asked questions, or at least put them into some kind of forum that gets out to the community to answer these. There's a lot of the same, theme here. And so I'm hoping that you can get the word out and answer these questions. As you said, the next board meeting is April 12th, and you'll be discussing this further then, and you'll take any feedback prior to that and after that. So any final comments from the board?
Just thank you all for being here. We hope to further engage with the community in this way, and hopefully an even less formal town halls. Like, that's the goal of the board, is to be able to communicate more openly. And I think this is, like Natalie said, we're constantly learning. And when making this proposal, we were under the impression that we were giving a month to discuss before it was coming back before the board, and we'd have time to begin that process. And clearly we've learned that we need to do better on that front. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening to come and engage and have a constructive conversation. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone on Zoom.